Hi, I'm Alvin, and I love cast iron. One day, the About to Eat team were talking amongst ourselves and discussing how it'd be cool to test out expensive versions of kitchen utensils and tools that we all liked. You might have already seen some of us documenting these experiences through our videos, such as Andrew's $500 Japanese kitchen knife and Inca's $329 toaster video. Well, today I am going to be sharing my experience with a $160 cast iron pan for 30 days. Full disclosure, this pan was paid for by the company, and we will make a little bit of money if you decide to buy the pan with the link below, but this video is not sponsored, and I will be giving my full and honest experience with these 30 days. So, going into this, I really had three big major questions. Number one, how does this $160 cast iron pan compare to the $25 cast iron that I've used for many years and love, both performance and utility wise and in appearance? Number two, will this $160 cast iron pan incentivize me to cook with it more because of its many features? And finally, would I have paid $160 of my own money to buy this pan knowing everything that I learned in these 30 days? Well, let's find out. So this pan is from a company called Smithey. I ordered the number 10 cast iron skillet with a leather handle because, why not? The first impression of the pan itself, it really is quite beautiful. I really like the factory finish they applied. It's really smooth, shiny, reminiscent of those beautiful copper pans found in professional kitchens. Visually, it's stunning. It is definitely prettier than my $25 cast iron by far, but I was really curious if this polished satin-like finish would actually last after 30 days of cooking with it. I really like that the pan came with these little tidbits of helpful information in the form of these little cards. I think it really made using this expensive tool for the first time a lot less intimidating. After giving it a quick wash and dry as per the instructions, I was excited to read that one of the best first things to cook in this pan was caramelized onions and beef, which is one of my favorite combinations. It says that there's already a few layers of seasoning on this pan, which makes it ready to use out of the box. So I got a bunch of onions, cut them up with my new knife, by the way, and I heavily browned some 90-10 beef for this pan's maiden voyage. This beef is getting nice and brown, and to use up all the fond that the beef left behind, I then caramelized all the onions that I cut, just basically a buttload of onions in some butter. Everything's working, so far so good. Nothing was sticking. The seasoning applied to the pan from the factory finish seemed to be working pretty well. Honestly, it was just pretty fun to break in this new toy, stirring and cooking onions for quite a long time. So after about 2 hours or so, mixing these onions, deglazing it, reducing it, adding the beef back in, my entire apartment just smelled like great stuff. I essentially had made kind of like a caramelized beef and onion jam, which actually tasted quite similar to an oxtail jam that I loved at a French restaurant one night. Pretty pleasant surprise. And after cooking with this for the first time, the first thing that I did notice was that the factory finish essentially almost all but came off. I don't know if it was due to the long cook time, the acidity from the onions, the constant stirring with the wooden spoon, or the exposure to the high heat, but this pan definitely looked drastically different from the shiny new pan from 3 hours ago. Honestly, that was kind of disappointing. I was secretly rooting for the finish on the pan to stay on, but I guess it kind of showed that underneath, this is still a cast iron pan, and cast iron is cast iron. To clean this cast iron, it's recommended to only use water if possible. That way you don't strip off any of those seasonings. Things like harsh dish soaps or abrasives like steel wool would tend to scrape that away. But I had a lot of these burnt sugars and fond from the beef that eventually got a little too dark and stuck around for a bit. So I actually resorted to a cleaning technique taught to me by the very talented Claire King. So instead of using something like steel wool, this technique actually involves using a generous amount of kosher salt and scrubbing it around with a sponge. The rough textures of the kosher salt not only act as an abrasive, but also as an absorbing medium. It feels almost like using a loofah, when you're showering. It's gentle, but it does get the job done. At this point, as you can see, the pan does desperately need a reseasoning, so here we go. The way I do it, I let my cast iron heat on my stove at the highest heat until it starts to smoke, like a lot of smoke. At this point, my windows are open, my vent fan is on, I have another fan right next to the stove to sort of push all those fumes towards the window. After it's smoking, I'm wiping a very, very thin layer of neutral oil all over the pan using a paper towel on this really, really, really hot cast iron while it's still on the stove. You can hurt yourself if you're not careful. So there is also an oven method that if you can find online works really well. I do this because it's quicker and I think it's just more satisfying. I'm not sure exactly what the science behind why the seasoning works the way it does, but I believe it has something to do with how extremely high heat reacts with the oil and creates almost like a non-stick like layer. Some of the chemical composition starts to change, old bonds are broken down, new bonds are formed. I'm not exactly sure. Please trust an .edu website for this information. But after doing this a few times, you're letting the oil smoke, you're rubbing on a thin layer, wiping out the excess, repeating that over, the cast iron should be seasoned. So as you can see, I got a little bit too excited and I used a little bit too much oil, which is why there's these little spots that happen all over the pan. It's not a big deal. It's not going to cause anything crazy to happen, but the oil layer should be really, 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 really thin. So because of my schedule, I decided to cook at least one fun dish in my cast iron per week just to help me answer those 3 questions from the beginning of this video. Today I decided to make Tarte tatin, one of my favorite desserts to bake and one that I've actually made for the 3 ways we used cast iron video on this channel. I thought it'd be fun to make the same recipe in this cast iron since I made it with my $25 one in that video just to compare. So this recipe is pretty simple. Make a caramel with salt, sugar, and butter until it's smooth. I cooked a buttload of apples in this caramel until the apples release their juices, then reduce down into this nice glaze that coats every single piece. As you can see, I got a little too excited and overcooked some of these apples, so a little bit softer than I usually would have liked. Then I'm just putting them in the cast iron, fanning them out, filling in the gaps as much as I can, and then after a circle of puff pastry goes on top, the whole thing goes into a really, really hot oven until the pastry is really nice and golden brown. This is kind of deja vu for me because making this it feels and looks exactly the same as when I had made it with my $25 cast iron. And once this is all cooled off, a little flip upside down into a plate and there it is. Not as shiny or as clean as I would have hoped, but that's because I messed up when it came to overcooking the apples. I don't think the cast iron contributed to why it looks this way because the release of the tart was actually quite smooth. Very pleased with the performance on this one. Tastes pretty good too, exactly how I make it. So all in all, pretty satisfied. For cleanup, there's actually quite a bit of caramelized sugar that was quite hard to clean off, and I scrubbed it pretty hard with a sponge under running hot water. And maybe because my previous seasoning wasn't the best, but I definitely had to re-season the pan after making this dish as well. I mean, I don't really mind because I honestly find seasoning a cast iron quite honest, so I'll take any excuse I can. So it's been another week since I last used my cast iron. This time I decided to pull it out to cook one of my favorite things, which is steak. One of the biggest reasons I love cast iron is because it retains heat really well and also transfers heat really well, especially to things like steak, where having this nice crust is just really beneficial to the food. After I'm rendering some beef fat in the pan, I threw in 2 ribeyes to just sear off. I was pretty excited to cook steak because my $25 cast iron is actually only 9 inches in diameter. So having this new 10-inch pan actually allowed me to finally fit 2 steaks at the same time. Seems like something small, but to me, it cuts down a ton of cook time, especially since these steaks are for my friends and I really like serving people at the same time. And the crust on these steaks, not bad. I like my steaks medium rare, so these didn't spend more than 2 minutes total in the pan. And while the steaks are resting on a rack outside a frame, I made a quick garlic herb butter in the same pan with rosemary, sage. I actually don't like the popular butter basting method because I think it leaves a ton of leftover, wasted, sometimes burnt butter in the pan, or prolongs the time a steak might spend in a pan, which could overcook it. Instead, I just use a little bit, and I like to brush it on top of the steak after it's sliced instead, so that each piece gets an even coat. One thing that I did notice about the Smithey pan is that after it is re-seasoned, it does take back quite a good amount of the former luster, which makes it visually very appealing as a serving dish for food. So I decided to serve my steaks along some fries inside the pan itself. For me, it really made serving steak feel like more of an event. That feeling where you go to a steakhouse and the steak comes at the table and it's a fancy restaurant and it's sizzling in this cast iron platter. And definitely have to give props for the Smithey pan for being able to give me that I don't think I would have been able to get with my older pan. Another weekend, another fun food adventure. So this time it's cheeseburgers. If you know me, you can probably tell by now that I'm just cooking all my favorite things inside this cast iron just to see how things go. So these are just brioche buns toasted in brown butter and sage. Another pleasant surprise, based on this 10-inch diameter of the pan, I can toast 4 buns at the same time instead of just 2. It sounds dumb, but it kind of feels like when you move into like a larger bedroom and you realize that all the new things you can do with that much more space. Honestly, it made me pretty happy because I do make burgers every now and then. I could also fit in 2 patties at the same time because before I'd only be able to do 1, and that made me pretty happy. For the beef, I'm cooking a personal blend of dry-aged ribeye trimmings, short rib, and brisket. And maybe because this pan is newer or that my seasoning was pretty good this time, but it was very, very satisfying to flip these patties over. One huge standout for me is to note how amazing the crust this pan just gave to the burger. It's this beautiful, perfect, dark golden brown from wall to wall. After that, some American cheese, steaming it a little bit under a lid, and the patties go rest on a wire rack so that the extra fat can drip off. One thing I usually find annoying about making burgers is that in between each round of patties, I'd have to clean off any burnt bits of cheese, beef, or fat before I could sear the next batch. With my old cast iron, I'd often have to basically wash the whole thing, reapply oil, and reheat it, which caused me a ton of delays. But this pan, I was really surprised. I could easily just scrape off all those burnt bits, and just after a quick wipe with a paper towel, it was basically ready to go. For burgers, this pan seems to be really, really, really solving a ton of my efficiency issues. The burger itself is pretty simple. 2 toasted buns, 2 patties with some cheese, some burger sauce that I made earlier, and that's it. And to clean up, I think I could have waited 1 to 2 more uses in this pan before re-seasoning the whole thing, but honestly, I thought it couldn't really hurt to just do a little bit instead of just waiting until everything was stripped away to give it a full re-seasoning. It's fun to see it essentially come back to life. So it's day 30. The last thing I wanted to cook in my cast iron is actually a recipe directly from Smithey's website. And I decided to try out a recipe that I'd actually had never made before. It's a Ricotta Dutch baby pancake. So I'm following the recipe directly from Smithey's website, but I'm actually increasing the recipe by 50% because theirs is designed for 2 6-inch cast iron pans instead of 1. So these are just some macerated strawberries that I decided to make right before filming. But what's also really cool about this recipe is that it's mainly done in a blender. I actually don't have a blender, so I'm using a food processor. So there's things like ricotta, sugar, eggs, lemon juice, and flour that kind of all get mixed up. So once the cast iron is hot, I'm putting in some butter to heat as well. Then once the butter is sizzling, basically brown butter to me, I'm pouring the batter directly into the pan while it's still in the oven. And this actually reminds me of how Yorkshire puddings are made, where a liquid batter is poured into a really, really hot metal vessel, which is lined with sizzling fat. And I just really like to watch this transform, especially because the butter makes those edges so crispy and appetizing. I had a feeling those were gonna be my favorite parts. So after the Dutch baby is done, the garnish is just some powdered sugar with those macerated strawberries, and that's about it for this dish. I think this is also another case in which the visual aesthetic of the pan and how it looks made the final dish appear really appetizing to me, especially because it contrasted really well with this light blue cloth that I had laid out. Again, very, very easy release from the pan when I'm taking out a slice of the baby pancake. Maybe it was because of the butter, maybe it was because of those multiple layers of seasoning I had applied by day 30, but it was very, very satisfying to make and serve this dish. Taste-wise though, I actually don't think this recipe is for me. Maybe I had done something wrong since this was my first time making a dish like this, but I think I was expecting more of a fluffy pancake, and this kind of fell on the spectrum of a bread pudding. That's just my preference, but I did really like the strawberries and those crispy edges. I guess also making it in a 10-inch pan does alter the ratio of crispy edge to soft custardy center a little too much, so it's probably why this recipe was designed for 2 6-inch pans for a reason. I think at this point I realized just every time I use this pan, it's fun. All those dishes that I'm cooking, everything is a little bit more fun than my old one, which is really cool. So after 30 days, the 3 major questions still remain. Number 1, how does this $160 cast iron pan compare to the $25 one I own? I think that $160 Smithey pan definitely has an edge in appearance. It has a sleek finish that, even though was lost a little bit throughout the process, does come back with seasoning, and because of that I did end up using it to serve a lot of dishes that I might not have served in my $25 pan. Question number 2, will this $160 cast iron pan incentivize me to cook more with it because of its features? I say yes. I definitely think this Smithey cast iron, because of its aesthetic appeal and its performance being on the similar level with other cast iron that I own, did incentivize me to cook with it. I was excited to serve things like the steak in it. I was excited to see how it made the Dutch baby look really nice. I was excited that it could fit 2 steaks and 4 burger buns and 2 burger patties. I did enjoy being like, this feels more efficient. Like, I wanted to make it just so I could feel that I was being faster, I was being better at making these things. And finally, the big question. Would I have paid the full $160 to buy this pan myself with my own money, knowing everything that I've been able to trial in the last 30 days? No. $160 is a lot of money, and I have a cast iron pan that costs $25. If I pay $135 more for a cast iron pan, I also expect it to perform at a higher level utility-wise than just from a pure aesthetic point of view. I do enjoy beautiful things, but I do have a price. So even though I might not have bought this with my own money just for me to use at home, the memory of using it, the experience of using it, and even knowing that it did cost $160 was exciting to me. And I think if you're able to give that to someone else, I think that's a really, really, really cool thing to have, because that tool is going to last them quite a long time. But I did very enjoy my 30 days with this cast iron, and I'm looking forward to many, many more. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys later.